Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now, 865-243-TALK. That's 243-8255. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
And welcome to the Patrick Riggins Show, bringing you a weekly dose of sanity in an insane and increasingly unstable world, providing an oasis of reasoning, logic, along with freedom and liberty, so you can maintain your lucidity amongst this sea of people being blown about by the ocean of government rules, regulations, and unconstitutional actions. These people are your students, your pupils, and they are depending on you to explain to them why they should not give up their rights to an overreaching and increasingly tyrannical government. And helping to keep us on the air and making noise is the radio station serving as an outpost for the Lone Riders of Liberty, WNOX FM 100.3, currently broadcasting from within the borders of this nation held hostage. Our signal is being heard in parts of 5 of these great southeastern United States and both the eastern and central time zones. If you'd like to tune in over the internet, well, you can do that. Just bring up your web browser and type in www.wnoxfm.com. There you will see the innermost workings of this broadcast complex, along with me fighting the good fight for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. That web address again is wnoxfm.com. And joining us back from vacation is our producer, Tori.
Hey.
Even though you said you were going to call in last week but didn't, I just I chalked it up to you having to use your one phone call to contact your lawyer instead of trying to get through to the show.
No, but I was listening.
You were
listening last week. Lazy? I was being lazy.
That's
good.
good.
I believe that was one of the statements that you and Shine was talking about.
Yeah.
As I was working on, I think, probably my 9th hour of driving. I was being late. You hurt me. You hurt me, Patrick.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't call.
No, is that what it was? You
no.
thought, well, let's just see how good he gets along without me.
Evidently, U.S. Cellular is just U.S. East Tennessee, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work very good on coastal states, I've noticed. So, but I got to hear you.
Well, that's good. You know, if you couldn't get through still, you know. And probably with 9 hours of driving, you probably were... Did you have your wits about you? Or would you have just been babbling?
I was babbling already. So.
And slobbering. And
it just makes me know that you just can't do it without me. So it just reinforces that fact that you need me.
We were in a life raft last week, you know, waiting, and we just barely made it. But Sean, he worked out. He was okay. So, you know.
Yeah. Whenever you guys was talking bad about me, I gave him a little text. I don't know if he passed it along.
No, he did not.
I cannot repeat it on the radio, but I'll tell you during the break what it was.
Yes, he neglected to pass that along. I guess he didn't want me to start bad-mouthing you on the air.
It's probably better that he didn't.
All right.
Love you.
We have a lot to get to today, but before we get going, thank you to everyone tuning in this week. I'm glad you're here for another foray into the annals of libertarianism. That is with a lowercase L, not the uppercase one. You see, I don't pledge my allegiance to any political party. I pledge my allegiance to my fellow citizens, that I will never stop fighting to restore the rights that Americans before us have fought so hard to retain. These rights that are endowed in us by our Creator, whoever that you may believe that to be, that our rights are natural and are derived from our very being, not given to us by anyone nor any government, and that we came first. We were here first. The government came second. We are not born with government, but we are born with our rights, our freedoms, and our liberties. And it is up to us to ensure we keep these, because even though our government is of, by, and for the people, by its very nature, it will constantly be working to take rights from us and give them to itself. It is the monster underneath the bed, the demon hiding in the closet, the dragon flying around outside your window. But unfortunately, it is all too real. ready to consume anything you will feed it. It gorges itself on your money and surreptitiously siphons off your freedoms while you are happily enjoying your life, and most people are not paying attention. It dazzles them with the tricks and entertainment that make them laugh, while it slyly reaches into their back pocket to rob them, all the time convincing you that life without it would be impossible, that you need it, and if you'll just let it into your life little by little, you'll be much better off. But, like the devil, the government is a liar. It is a deceiver. It brings destruction and dependence to those who will give it quarter in their lives. Just like the sirens of old, beguiling the unwary sailors onto the rocks, this seductress is out to wreck the ship of your dreams, to cloud the passage through these storms and trials of life. But don't worry, because cutting through this fog and giving light for your safe journey is this radio show. I am here to exorcise the demon of governmental enslavement from your life, to free you from the chains that are weighing you down and keeping you from becoming all you can be. I am here to enlighten you, of course, too, as to your hidden and undiscovered potential. This self-made person waiting to be released from the velvet-lined prison of your government-dependent life. And what do you get from this? It is a refreshing state of mind, and you will ultimately enjoy it if you work at it. Starting down this road, though, sometimes means leaving the thinking of your friends and peer group behind. Occasionally a few will come with you, but most will not. Although, you can be of good cheer, because when they see how much better and more rewarding your life has become, they will seek out what you know. And then you can tell them all about your newfound attitude, and if you like, even direct them to this radio show to help them along. Speaking of which, this week on the show, we'll be talking about how the government thinks itself and its employees are far, far above the law, even to the point of telling a judge as much. We also have some clips from a news conference President Obama had, along with my comments and analysis, and a real honest-to-good, feel-good story just to show you all is not lost with your fellow Americans. All that in your phone calls as we can work them in. This is Patrick Riggins with The Patrick Riggins Show. We will be right back with the rest of the show. On Friday, President Obama held a news conference, and in this he addressed a couple of things, one of which was the economy. And if you did not get a chance to watch or listen, or even if you did, I have a couple of things that you might have missed, unless, that is, you have been tuning your libertarian ear to catch these things. And an excellent way to keep it on key is by listening to this show, hint, hint. Anyway, back to the news conference. During his initial remarks, he wanted to point out one of the weaknesses of our economy, and this is what he said.
One of the biggest weaknesses has been state and local governments, which have laid off 450,000 Americans.
So, not unemployment in the private sector, the very engine that drives our country. No, this is a big government guy. The problem as he sees it is government does not provide enough people, or does not have enough people working for it. Government, that huge bureaucracy that sucks up all the taxpayers' money in this country. And don't be afraid, though, because President Obama is not going to pose a question without telling you his government-sponsored solution to the problem. And, of course, here it is.
State and local government hiring has been going in the wrong direction. Congress should pass a bill putting them back to work right now, giving help to the states so that those layoffs are not occurring.
So we should take more federal money and give it to the states and local governments so they can hire more people, because there just aren't enough people working in government now. We need even more. The sad fact of the matter is that the money the federal government has started out in the hands of the people living in the states where he wants more hiring. His federal government is sucking up all the money, running it through the bureaucracies in Washington so as his people can get paid, and then sending it right back to where it came from. Albeit it's about a tenth of what was sent up there to begin with. But lest you worry about the private sector, don't, because everything is just fine. We need those government jobs, though.
The private sector is doing fine. Where we're seeing weaknesses in our economy had to do with state and local government, oftentimes cuts initiated by governors or mayors who are not getting the kind of help that they have in the past from the federal government, and who don't have the same kind of flexibility as the federal government in dealing with fewer revenues coming in.
Yep. Those state and local governments, they just don't have the same flexibility as the federal government. And what is that? Well, the feds, they just crank up the printing presses and print more dollars. And in the process, they are devaluing the money that is in your wallet without you even knowing it. You see, it is a lot easier to print more money than to raise your taxes. But the effect is exactly the same. You have less purchasing power, either through the fact that your dollars are worth less when the government prints more, or you have less of them through sending them to the government when they tax you. So one of the solutions that Obama proposes for small businesses, because even though the private sector is fine, I guess they still need some help for some reason because, as I said, they're fine. But here is his proposal.
Instead of just talking a good game about job creators, Congress should give the small business owners that actually create most of the new jobs in America a tax break for hiring more workers.
So we should give a tax break for hiring more workers. How about giving small business a tax break and just leave it at that? Because Obama and all government types want to tell you what you have to do with your tax break. They don't think businesses would hire people if they started doing well. No, those evil business owners would just keep all the money to themselves. Never mind, by hiring more workers, their businesses will grow and they'll get even more money. No, they won't do that. They'll keep all that to their greedy selves and not hire these poor people that Obama wants them to hire. This is how screwed up these people's thinking really is. They don't believe businesses will work to grow and expand unless the government is directing them to do it. Also in this news conference, it steered into the problems Europe is having, and being a typical government has the solution, a typical government has a solution kind of guy, Obama wanted to be sure that we all understand that government spending is not the whole problem over there.
In Europe is not simply a debt crisis. You've got some countries like Greece that genuinely have spent more than they're bringing in.
So it's not a debt crisis, but we have countries like Greece that have spent more than they have taken in. Sounds to me like a debt crisis. If you spend more than is coming in, I would call that a problem with debt. To further drive the point home, he actually mentions this again in response to one of the other questions.
It's not simply a debt crisis. What is true is that the markets, getting nervous, have started making it much more expensive for them to borrow.
The markets are getting nervous and making it more expensive for them to borrow. If they don't have the money and have to borrow it, let's see, let me think on this. They don't have the money, so they have to borrow it. Well, I'm going to have to go with what is a debt crisis. I mean, the government is spending more money than is taking in. Sounds just like one to me, but Obama criticizes what he sees as the wrong thing to do.
They are just cutting and cutting and cutting, and their unemployment rate is going up and up and up.
So cutting and cutting and cutting that government spending is not the way to solve a debt crisis. Because Obama, and now I'm not just picking on him, because it is also Washington, as well as a lot of people in state and local governments. They're just chock full of people who think that spending taxpayers' money is the way to get out of an economic problem. And the way to boost employment is for government to hire more people. But it is like trying to build a perpetual motion machine. It won't work. Government does not produce anything. All it does is take money from one person and then they give it to another. It does not add value at all. And this is the reason we need much less government than we have. And the reason why all these government-type people fight so hard to grow it. They think they have the answer to all of the problems that we face. And along those same lines with government people, you might have noticed, and especially lately here, how vitriolic the political races have gotten and how much people are just absolutely seething when it comes to losing them. And the reason I bring this up is because you may be asking yourself, why? With Scott Walker winning the recall in Wisconsin and now receiving death threats, you tend to wonder why so much is riding on just an election. And it's simple. It's money. There is so much money concentrated in government right now that whoever is in there can basically dole it out to their friends, making them rich in the process. And that is what a whole lot of people want access to. Unfortunately, this is what is also corrupting a lot of people who want a certain candidate in office so they can have money funneled to them and their friends. This is why the founders of this country worked to make sure the power ultimately resided with the people, and a little was given to the government in order to do what it had to do. They wanted government to only have just enough power to fulfill its constitutional obligations and just enough money to fund those activities. When government has excess money, it starts down the road of inserting itself into more and more things which are not constitutional. So what do we need to do? For starters, we can cut taxes so we can begin starving this beast we've created and move power back from the capital and state houses to the people of the country. Only then, when we do that, will we retrieve our freedoms and liberties, which we have been ceding to the government on almost a wholesale basis. This story came across my desk on Friday, and some of you guys might have already heard about it, but I wanted to be sure and talk about it on the show this week. It's about 18-year-old Dawn Loggins from North Carolina, and she has been accepted into Harvard. While that may not seem like a big deal, Dawn Loggins is homeless, or was homeless. You see, she had been living with her parents, who had been constantly getting evicted from their houses. Her mother was perpetually unemployed, and her stepdad was constantly on the run from law enforcement. So it should come as no surprise when one day, when they were living in Raleigh, she came home and both parents were gone. Just an empty house. No furniture, no note, nothing. So what did she do? Well, she stayed at some friends' houses and decided, instead of using this as an excuse to give up, she wanted to turn her life around and make things happen. Incidentally, if this sounds somewhat familiar, it is because you've heard me talking about this very type of determination on this show. We used to be a nation with people, when they got knocked down, they would jump right back up. You could ask an employee who just got fired or laid off, or an entrepreneur that lost their business, and you'd say, well, what are you going to do now? And they would respond, well, I'm going to try this, or I'm going to move over here because there are a lot of people hiring in that area. They would pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make the situation work. They would turn around a bad situation and use it as an opportunity. Now, when you ask people that question, the first thing people say is they want a government program to take care of them. We're just rapidly becoming a nation of dependent children. And even more wisdom emanated from my lips just a little bit later in that same piece. Now, these two clips are from the April 22nd show, but note how they directly relate to this story. This is why this show, incidentally, is rocketing higher and higher in audience numbers. Some kids are actually more mature than adults nowadays, because a lot of times, if you've ever worked with a child, they're the first ones, he'll say, they do not want you to do something for them. They want to do it themselves. They'll say, I can do this, Mommy, or whatever. They want to do it. But then somewhere along the way of growing up, we lose the I want to do it, and we become, well, I'll try it, maybe, and if it doesn't work out, I want to bail out, or I'm just not even going to try it at all. People will just say, I can't make it. I have to have government. Some kids are actually more mature than adults nowadays. Truer words could not have been spoken. So by listening to this show, you will be tuned into and ready for the supposed breaking news in the future. You'll be able to say you heard something like that on this show almost 2 months ahead of time. But back to the story, I don't want to take anything away from Dawn and her success. She just graduated. Here's why this story's coming out. Now, Dawn's parents have left her, and she is living with some friends, determined to make this bad situation into an opportunity. One of her quotes in the story is, "All the help in the world isn't going to do you any good if you're not willing to work hard. I think people were so willing to help me because they saw that I was reaching for my goals, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me." Now, to make ends meet, Dawn worked as a school janitor. She started long before the other students arrived for the start of the school day. She was sweeping floors, she was cleaning up bathrooms, she was wiping down the classrooms, all this time while attending high school. So what kept her going through all of this? And this is in her words.
A lot of people use bad situations as an excuse, and instead of doing that, I use them as motivation.
Sounds hauntingly familiar, doesn't it? They would turn around a bad situation and use it as an opportunity. This is the American spirit right here, turning a bad situation around into an opportunity. Too many people don't do that anymore. Heck, most people aren't even close to the situation Dawn found herself in, but they still don't want to work. They don't want to do for themselves. Alexandra Pelosi, and yes, this is Nancy Pelosi's daughter, created a video back in March of this year, and she went and interviewed some individuals outside the welfare office in New York City. Now, in this clip, she asked them what they were at the welfare office for.
I'm here trying to get some Obama bucks. That's what I'm doing, trying to get some Obama money. I ain't here to get some benefits. You know what I mean? I'm here to get a check. I want a check.
Now, that's a little noisy, but the first individual said he was there to get Obama bucks, some Obama money. And the second individual just said he wants checks. He was there to get a check. This, my friends, is the problem in America today. We absolutely have to stop taking money from one citizen and giving it to another. It is not right. It does the country no good. And more importantly, it doesn't do the person receiving it any good either. It robs them of the privilege of earning their own money, of not being dependent on others for your living, of living a life with meaning, and instead of going through life constantly demanding that someone else take care of you. Let's listen to another quote from Dawn one more time, because it is so instructive. It's the same quote we just played here.
A lot of people use bad situations as an excuse, and instead of doing that, I use them as motivation.
So, if you're in this listening audience, and you're receiving some form of government assistance, just have the guts to drop it, to make a stand, to provide for yourself, and stop making excuses about why you cannot do it. You can. You just have to get out there and make it happen. What happens when you do? What is the feeling you get? Well, here it is in, again, Dawn's own words.
My future is going to be great, and I know it is, and like Harvard is going to make that happen, but also it's stability. I'm not going to have to worry about where my meals are coming from or where I'm going to sleep at night.
There you go. You are in charge of your life, and you're not dependent on others. if you're going to take care of yourself, take the first step today and make a vow to become an independent person, not living off the money taken from a fellow citizen. It will result in you feeling so much better about yourself and having a much better outlook on life. Warren Buffett, he's over the past spring here and into the summer has been advocating for higher taxes and even a millionaire surtax to help fund the government's bigger and bigger intrusion into American life. The thing I find interesting, and I'm just getting off on this a little bit, is that he constantly uses the example that he paid less tax than his secretary. And that's wrong. What I don't understand is why he thinks it is wrong. And if he thinks it's wrong, then why does he do it? The Treasury would gladly accept a check for whatever amount he wanted to send. But instead, he chooses to pay the lower tax and then complain about doing it. And if he doesn't want to give the money to the government, then at least give the difference to his secretary. If he despises it so much, he could just pay her more, which would raise her tax bill. But he decides to keep that money. Another interesting aspect of the situation is that he made his money by shrewdly investing it in companies where he thought he could make some money. However, when it comes to investing in our government, as liberals always call taxes, they call it making investments, Warren Buffett does not invest his money here. He keeps it for himself or his company. The reason is because he knows the United States government is a bad investment, and he tries to avoid making bad investments. So before he starts running off at the mouth about how everybody else needs to pay up, what he needs to do is put his money where his mouth is and just cut a check to the Treasury or to Tory. Tory would take a check.
I would take a check from Warren Buffett.
And you're pretty sure it's going to cash.
Yeah, well, I would hope so.
He could just give you a share of that stock. Shoot, that's
I know he's got a couple of bucks.
Yeah, I think he's getting by.
Yeah, just barely scraping it.
Yeah, he's clipping coupons. He actually probably still does that. So
I got coupons.
He's got coupons.
I got coupons to use.
All right, we're coming up on the last segment of the show here. This is Patrick Riggins with the Patrick Riggins Show. Looking out for you. I don't have a bullet in my hand, though, but Tory may have a sharpened stick over there hiding.
A sharpened stick. Poke you with a stick.
Yeah, he pokes me, and keeps me going. All right, we're at the last segment of the show. An interesting story came out this week, and it demonstrates just how far the government thinks it can go in violating your rights and get away with it. Now, the overview is, if the government has agents working for it, listening to your communications without a warrant, you should not be allowed to sue them. And for even more good news, Congress is probably going to reauthorize a law which explicitly legalizes such a thing anyway, wiretapping without approval of a judge. Now, these two agents, what happened was the government got caught wiretapping two attorneys without this warrant, and this was before this legislation passed authorizing it. Now, the attorneys sued and were awarded damages, but on appeal, the government is stating that you cannot sue the government, based on sovereign immunity grounds. If the attorneys try to sue the actual people doing the illegal wiretapping, well, then the government is just going to declare their names a state secret to shield them from prosecution. Now, this wiretapping is happening because the Congress, and this was when Senator Obama was in there and he voted for this, passed legislation allowing domestic spying in the summer of 2008. Now, for those of you to whom this is coming as news, government agents are currently allowed to write their own warrants without the approval of a judge. And this is, of course, in blatant violation of the Constitution. And if the people to whom they are serving the warrants tell anyone about them, they can be fined and imprisoned. Congress has also passed legislation giving the telecommunications companies like AT&T and Verizon, etc., all these different telecommunications companies, they've got immunity from lawsuits if they are providing their wiretapping for the government. So, yes, the government is spying on you, and if someone tells you about it, they can be prosecuted. If you find out about it and tell someone or write about it, then you can be prosecuted as well. how far we have come, all in the name of fighting terrorism. I know I play these clips from past shows a lot, but it only to demonstrate how much you will be informed by listening each week. Here's what I said about this whole terrorism war previously. When we have a conflict, though, this gives the government a reason to bargain us out of some of our freedom with the promise that when it's all over, we will get it back. Now, terrorists have been with us since the founding of this country. We just called them different names, but they were still the same. If we had Indians still out in the West raiding outposts, we'd be labeling them as terrorists. Or if we had people riding up from Mexico and burning towns because they claim this territory, we'd call them terrorists. So if we have a war on terror, and terrorists have been and always will be with us, then we will always be at war. So we'll always have to restrict freedoms and liberties in the name of that war. And unfortunately, too many people in this nation are merely laying down and allowing the government to do whatever it wants, all because the government promises to keep us safe from another terrorist attack. What happens if we aren't, though? What happens if the government does not protect us from another terrorist attack? Do we get our freedoms back? No way. In fact, they're going to take more of them, because if we do have a terrorist attack, well then, obviously they didn't take enough away previously to prevent it. You see, the government wins both ways. If we don't have an attack, then it was a good thing that we gave up some of our rights because it prevented one. Although there's not really any way to prove that. It's kind of like the Obama administration's constant claim that if they had not bailed out a bunch of companies, also in clear violation of the Constitution, then we would have a higher unemployment rate right now. How do you prove that? You can't. So if we have no terrorist attack, then giving up our rights prevented it. And if we do have a terrorist attack, then we didn't give up enough. You see, the government is using all of these different supposedly big crises in order to whittle away your freedoms and liberties. If you don't let your congressional representatives know you're not happy with it, they will just gladly go on voting for it. The way to solve this is if you start voting for people who are freedom and liberty minded, then we can start to turn around this huge mess before it gets any bigger. Because even though the government says it's going to keep us safe and everything's okay, if you stop and think about it, this is the same government that cannot run its agencies in any sort of efficient manner. It cannot control its own spending. Heck, it cannot control its own people, as evidenced by this very court case, that these attorneys or these government agents obviously wiretapped these two attorneys without a judge's approval before Congress authorized such a thing to go on. So clearly they were acting on their own or with the approval of their higher-ups still in government. And they didn't allow the Constitution to get in the way. These guys, these agents are trained, part of their training is law. And they know the law. They know what they can do and what they can't do. And they went ahead and did it anyway. Because, as being shown, they know the government is going to try and shield them from this prosecution for doing something so blatantly unconstitutional. Part of the problem is you have just this across-the-board disrespect for the individual citizen's rights and privacy in government. And so when one agency sees another agency not paying attention to the Constitution and just kind of doing what it wants to do, what's to stop it from doing it as two? So, it's just a spreading plague, I guess. When they see another agency doing it and get away with it, well then, when they want to do a little something that may be a little bit outside the Constitution, they don't care either, because we didn't prosecute the first guys that did it. Anyway, just something to be thinking about and something to let your representatives know. As I say, these guys work for you up there. All of these people in Washington that are in government work for you. They're your employees, and you should treat them as such. Again, I'd like to thank everyone who's listening to the show, and you guys make it more and more successful each week. And that's because I think we're providing a voice you don't normally get on the radio and on most conservative radio. You'll hear a lot of things about, as I've said before, government our way. We want government to govern like we want to, both sides. If you'd like more information about this show, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Also, be sure and hit that like button. And if you'd like to follow us on Twitter, it's at Patrick Riggins, little @ Patrick Riggins. Join me next Sunday afternoon when once again we'll talk about freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. This is Patrick Riggins. We will see you next Sunday. Have a great week.